Hey, there we are.
Howdy.
And I'll give us our very special background there.
Ooh.
So, yes, that's right. That's right. So, we need to first make sure everyone sees this wonderful little scroll down at the bottom so that no one's feelings are hurt if and when they're watching this and they're making their wonderful comments and we're not replying to them. This is a pre recorded encounter between Jimmy and Josh. And we are making this available so that we have something just in case we don't have enough people to cover all the bases. So don't get your feelings hurt. So this is pre-recorded, but we are glad to have you guys, and we wanted to take this opportunity, like I said, to kind of put something in the can because we want to make sure we always have something to share with you guys. And so Josh and I were just kind of talking about things. What's that?
I said, wouldn't it be funny if we didn't need this for like a year or something?
Right. Right. We just don't know, right? I mean, this is one of those, just in case, right? So, but
now you guys can still interact with each other.
Yes.
Comment back and forth and like each other's status, comments and stuff. But we just won't be able to pull them up on screen and talk to you directly.
You can make snide comments at us and we can't do anything about it.
It's true. It's a good point.
Because we may never even see them. So this is a very unique opportunity. So, but anywho's, this is actually being recorded on a Thursday afternoon, and it's windy and gray outside, and we're just sitting here having afternoon beverages and talking to you. And
yeah, I don't know about you, but last week I was okay, but this week my allergies have just gotten to me bad, and there was one day where Sarah was kind enough to get up with CJ, and I got like 9 hours of sleep, and I'm still just like I could probably sleep for like 20 out of 24 hours and still be tired.
My eyes feel like a donut that's been rolled in crystal sugar. They just, and every time I rub my eye, it's like I'm pulling a nugget out of my eye. It's terrible.
Yeah, I just don't like I got a little congestion. I got a little, all that little stuff. Thing, and I mean, not to complain. I'm not complaining. I'm just stating the fact that I just don't like the weariness. It just absolutely drags out of me, and I'm just, man, it is. I need some sun.
My eyes are ready for bed all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
So if you guys come to campus and you see us, laid back in our chairs, just
yeah.
We just need a little pick me up.
It's a little easier for Josh because you can't see around his corner. I have to make sure. I'm inside the angle. So
something happened to the pastor.
Yeah, where is he? I can't see him. So yeah, for sure. So, but I wake up every morning and there's a pollen alert. Like I need to be told there's a pollen alert, and
mine's the tree stuff. They got more tree stuff.
Came through, and that's one of my big ones for sure. And
I just feel it in the back of my throat, and I know it. I'm like, oh man, and then I know it's too late. I should have been taking my allergy meds as preventative, and I'm like, yeah.
Well, what's frustrating to me is I feel this way, and I'm taking it, man. I've been taking one per day for, I bet you 2.5, 3 weeks. So I can't imagine if I weren't taking them. So.
Yeah, it was weird because I had that going on last night. I had pain in my back that was so severe that I thought that I might have a kidney stone. And I was like, well, I took some ibuprofen and I went to bed, and I think it was just I wore my back brace, which helped. And I said, well, I'm either going to wake up in like 30 minutes and I'll be calling Jimmy, telling him, hey, I'm not coming in tomorrow, or I'm going to wake up and I'll be okay. And thankfully I woke up and I was fine, but I've had one before, so I know what they are. And it was, I was starting to get up to the whole going in my head, like, man, I'm chugging water, I'm ready to get some lemonade, I'm ready to do all the things that I know to do. But thankfully, so it's
Oh,
just I had a bunch of like it was all minor stuff, but all coupled together. Man, I didn't go to sleep. I didn't sleep well at all last night.
mm.
But that's just how it goes sometimes.
I sleep okay. I told you night before last I dreamt I was made Pope.
That's right.
So that
You
was
need a
very
hat.
wild. It was very wild because I was fully understanding, and I thought, well, I'm going to bring jeans to the papacy, and we're really gonna do things a little different around here, boys. And
I'm gonna be the Southern Baptist Pope.
that's right, that's right. We're really going to change some things up, and so that was pretty funny. And so
Can you
it's just been
imagine?
just a weird week
Yeah,
because I had the privilege of going out to a hockey game Tuesday night. Well, that's not a Tuesday night thing,
right.
and so it's just been. And then tonight, my wife and I were blessed. There's a concert series down at the Texan. Now, I've been at the Texan for inside the theater actually for two causes. One was to officiate the one and only wedding that I'm aware of taking place there.
Right.
And second was a afternoon screening of Apollo 13.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was awesome. I learned about that by accident, but I was glad. So there's a concert tonight by a young lady, Caitlin Butts.
Okay.
And yes, I'm childish because I'm giggling in my head. But Caitlin, and we were graciously given um, tickets to that show tonight
Hmm.
by Brian and I. So
What kind of music does she play? Like heavy metal
country.
or
She looks
gangster rap?
she looks to be a country and western.
Okay.
I listened to some of her stuff on Pandora, and so down at the Texan, not only is it the live show, but it comes with
Ooh.
dinner and things. So
Oh, you get the whole thing.
a whole thing, man. It's like a date night. If I don't tell her, she'll think I bought them. So, but
Now you're, you're
yeah,
you're showing your age a little bit, calling it country and western music.
country and western.
You but you're back from when Willie Nelson was singing in
That's
Suits.
right. Back when it was real country. Yeah. So that's cool. And then I had dinner with my son-in-law last night. That's cool. And so this week it's been a blessing. It's just been very different. Very
So do
different.
you know the author Silverstein who wrote like The Giving Tree and stuff like that? Some different children's books.
Mhm.
He was a famous children's book author. Anyway, he's most famous for The Giving Tree, but he was also, I didn't know this until yesterday. He also wrote. He didn't perform, but he wrote country music. So he wrote some stuff for Loretta Lynn. He actually wrote A Boy Named Sue. Um, so this guy was telling this story about, I can't remember where they were, but it was like him and Willie and Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan and Shel Silverstein, and it was just so crazy because I only know Silverstein as the author, and I didn't know he even wrote I mean country music that even I know as not a huge country music fan. So it's just
Mm.
crazy, man, how in reality, this world is so big and there's 7 billion people, but it's really such a small world when you think about it.
Yeah.
Things are so connected, and you learn things like that every day. That I mean, I don't know. It's just absolutely insane to me.
Speaking of that, where was I? Oh, my bride and I were out of town a week ago, and we stayed out of town overnight, and I got the opportunity to watch Discovery Plus.
Mm.
And there's this new show. Mike Rowe, the guy from Dirtiest Jobs, has this new show, and it's called 7 Degrees. And I'm trying to remember what the show was, but they take you, they give you two things that you like, they have nothing in
Yeah,
common. And they give you the 7 degrees
separation.
of how this thing
Hmm.
ends up, and it was phenomenal. It,
They like
it truly was. So I'm not trying to hawk Discovery Plus, but that show was really phenomenal because it really illustrated what you were saying is the world is a big place and there's a lot of people, but it's really pretty amazing how small it can be.
have
Uh,
you ever played that game? So that's called the 7 degrees of separation. Have you ever played the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, where you take Kevin Bacon, you take any other movie star, and within 7 films you can get to him?
I've heard of the game. I've never played it. So
There's a guy who does videos of it where he'll time himself and he'll get two random things. Like one of them that I saw was like the actress Megan Fox and a fox, and he goes on Wikipedia and all he can do, he can't, he just searches like Megan Fox, and then he has to click from the hyperlinks in that article and find his way to the Wikipedia article about an actual fox. He does all kinds of different things that aren't interrelated like that, and he'll do it in like 50. He tries to do it under 30 seconds, and he'll do it, man. He's crazy, but it's a fun game to play. If you can play that game if you have enough people that know enough like movies
right.
and actors and stuff like that. But it is crazy. I mean, it's how just interconnected we all are. There's really not that much that separates us. It's
No.
it's a very small world.
And and if you stay in one place long enough,
Sure.
that becomes even more the case. So it's pretty interesting. It's a blessing and a curse depending on what's going on, right? So
Yeah, that's true.
But,
Especially somebody like you that's got family, family all over, or people that know different family members. Because
right,
you got enough people to go like, oh, I know your dad, I know your brother, I know your sister.
right.
Even if they don't know you, it's like you can't go anywhere in this town.
No, you just so, but so yeah, it's been a good week, and we're wrapping up the Walk Through Fire sermon series on Sunday, and we're going to find out how it goes for Nebuchadnezzar, and how does he end up? That's an even a greater question. Is God has been patient in processing him, but at the end of the day, we all have a choice. It's our choice that we make, and then we continue to make. That ultimately leads us to where we'll end up, and so we'll get to look. I can't say we're going to have a definitive answer, but we have at least two options that we'll be able to contemplate.
Well,
So
the crazy thing about it is the people that are watching this now, they might have already heard that sermon.
That's true. Wow, I didn't even think about that. That's right. You had to start over because I put something in here that may have already happened, right?
No, that's
and
okay.
I've already put one item on the living room table, for this week. So, I guess that's true. Especially if it's a year from now or something.
Yeah.
This may come up, if they get around to carving on me. This could come up then. Who knows? Anyway, what I want to do is let me back both of us out of here and let folks get a good look at our background, because it directly applies to the topic that we're going to be discussing here now. So hold on just.
Nope.
So yeah, we're going to be talking about greed today. So we are like the TV series.
You had it.
I did. I'm looking right at it. Law and Order. We are ripping the news straight from the headlines.
I love that show.
Last week, a person who is famous passed away, and I thought to myself, that would be a great conversation starter, because a lot of people heard about him back in his heyday, and then there's been kind of a resurgence about him. The Biography Channel just did I think it was a 3-part series on him and things. The name is Bernie Madoff. And you may not, that name may not ring a bell with you, but if I use the phrase Ponzi scheme, now that starts to ring a bell. So basically, the Ponzi scheme is actually named after a man by the name of Ponzi, who was an immigrant, and he did this, and if I remember correctly, he got murdered for it. So what it basically boils down to is that you take money from one person and you give money to another person under the guise of investment. And so the more people who give money in, the more money you have. And the goal is to keep the money going all the while you're kind of siphoning off the top, right?
Right.
And so Bernie Madoff is the king of the Ponzi scheme. So to give you some ideas, so Bernie Madoff was convicted of embezzlement and fraud, and I mean just a laundry list of things back in 2009.
Mm.
And he was sentenced to, I think it was 150 years, which was a life sentence for him. And he passed away last week at the age of 82. One of the things that made him come back to the mind of folks is he applied for emergency release when COVID started.
Gotcha.
You know, he was afraid of getting COVID in Club Fed. So Bernie Madoff, this one man, at the peak of his success, was worth $64.8 billion. Now, in light of today's money, and especially in light of someone like Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, that's just a pittance. But in its day, this was, I mean, he was a top dog. I mean, he was a top dog.
Man, I don't care what day you're in. That 65 billion is nothing to sneeze at.
65 billion. You can go to Burger King on that.
You could buy Burger King on that.
And so, you know, at the point, you know, at the peak, he was worth just short of $65 billion. And they said that his fraudulent activities affected over 37,000 people in 136 countries. Yeah. And he was convicted. He was sent to prison for the balance of his life. One of his sons took his own life because of the shame, just connected to the whole thing. Mm-hmm. His other son, unfortunately, was lost to cancer. And the only one of the family members now that remains is his wife. And, you know, I'm not quite sure, you know, how she's rolling right now. But we wanted to take this headline and kind of bring it over and bring some biblical perspective to it. So, Josh, what passage are we gonna look at today?
We're going to look at Luke 12, verses 13 through 21. That the heading in your Bible, it might say something like the parable of the rich landowner or the parable of the rich fool. But it is a parable of Jesus, obviously, and it's going to be talking about greed. And, man, before we get into it, I just wonder, you know, you said 37,000 people.
Yes.
How many people were in Greenville? Do you remember the last time they did the census? Do you remember what the total was? I mean, it was
32.
Yeah, so we're talking about, like, you know, it's probably bumped up a little bit in the last 10 years. So we're talking about maybe the entire population of Greenville. And how many people gave him their life savings, their retirement, their nest egg, and how many people lost everything?
Yes. Well, you had unions and colleges and all these who gave them the entire investment for retirement and things. I mean, just incredible sums of money. And what was interesting was one of the things that made him so enticing was when people would ask him to be a part of his investment, he would turn them down. And the more he turned them down, the more they wanted in.
Right.
And they said that people would come and, you know, and they would just beg him to take their money. And then, you know, unfortunately, this is what befell them. And there was one fellow in Europe, I think he was French, and he was some big shaker and mover. Well, he had led a lot of the aristocrats. That's a movie, aristocrats,
right,
to invest, and there were billions and billions of dollars lost, and he actually took his life as well.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, I wonder how many people, what the collateral damage as far as not just money, but human life. I mean, there's one guy, we know his son. There's at least two. I'm sure it's more than that. You know, one man's greed, you know, it's affected negatively on the lighter side all the way to ruined, or, you know, on the other side, 37,000 people's lives.
And it's even greater than that because, you know, there's 37,000, give or take, people, But what that does not take into account was what those resources were going to do further down the line.
Right.
You
Yep.
know, inheritance to your grandchildren, or what all these things. There's, quite truthfully, it's almost incalculable
Yeah.
the amount of destruction that the greed of this individual produced.
Because he spent a lot of it. I mean, they weren't able to get all of it, or
No,
they weren't able to get
they're
all of it back.
still trying to claw back money to this day. And no, they've, the
Pennies on the dollar.
pennies on the dollar, sure, because how do you go? Can you imagine the guy on the very back end? He got $50, and the guy goes, "Hey, I want your $50." Now, and they want, they're trying to claw back the money that they quote made.
Right.
So the money that you gave in, you're out. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing. And senior adults, I mean, it's just terrible. So
You just wonder, you wish you could. I mean, if you could sit down with this guy, there's a few questions you want to ask him. One of them would be, was he just spending money like water because he knew this thing was going to end and he was just trying to live as high on the hog as he could until it happened? Or was he so brazen? Did he have so much confidence? Was his greed to the extent that he thought he could just keep this going on forever?
Oh no, it's the latter.
Yeah.
Yeah, he.
Thought I
As
had
a
him
matter of
pulled.
fact, when it all started kind of coming apart, one of the last things he did was write bonus checks to family members. This guy, he was all in until it was all, and it was the financial crisis, at the end of the second Bush presidency,
2008, yeah.
that brought it down, because there wasn't the cash flow to keep it floating. And
So he might have still been doing it if it hadn't been for that. And wasn't it one of his sons or some of his sons that turned him in?
Right, because they discovered something, and they asked their attorney about it, and the attorney says, well, you have two options, and unless you turn your father in right now, then you'll be an accomplice. And yeah, his sons were the ones who dropped dime on him. And so it's just, it's a terrible thing. And one of the things that's interesting is no one ever starts out greedy. We're not just, it's just not something, there's a process. And so one of the things I want to share with us over our few minutes here is I've got kind of 7 bullet points that kind of highlight or can be an indicator of a person who is either greedy or has the potential. And the first one is overly self-centered behavior. Bernie Madoff was very successful as a businessman before he went bad.
Right.
That's one of the things about this type of thing is you have to have a certain level of cachet and success before people start giving you real money.
Right.
And and that's the tragedy is he was successful, quote unquote. He was a multimillionaire before he became a thief,
Right.
and somewhere in there the self-centeredness took over, because he wasn't doing it for the success of other people. Somewhere in there, he got that eye disease really, really, really bad, and it took him over.
And he didn't care who he hurt.
Yeah. And I think one of the first sure indicators of the potential of greediness is envy of other people. Envy and greed are twins. They always travel together. And that's a great challenge, because we live in a consumer-driven economy.
Right.
For our economy to really kind of go at peak, we have to be buying things. And the challenge is the only way to make sure people continue to buy things is to keep them continually dissatisfied. It's always newer, bigger, better. Look at the evolution of the cell phone.
Sure.
So do you remember back when the smaller the phone, the better it was?
Oh yeah.
Oh, look, you can't even see it in your pocket. Well, and then we went to, basically you're holding an iPad to your ear, and now we're starting to see it go the other way, right?
Yep.
And why? Well, they've got to keep changing it. Something's got to change because the inside of the phone isn't as eye-catching as the outside of the phone. So
Gotta have the latest and the best.
you do, and envy's a terrible thing. I was having a conversation recently with someone, and they were really suffering with eye disease. Just this envy of what other people had, and one is that's just the way life is sometimes. Okay, that's Michael Jordan can dunk a basketball, Jimmy Vaughn cannot. That's just the way, right?
Yep.
But a greater challenge for us as believers is if we allow ourselves to give over into the green eyes of envy, is that unintentionally we're saying, God, you're not providing for me
Right.
enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I can promise you, I don't think anyone would ever say that,
Right. Out loud.
But when we find ourselves that way, that's what we're saying. God, you're not doing right by me. And so I'm going to have to take these steps to make sure I get everything that I should get.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about greed, I mean, greed is really looking at something that you shouldn't have, that doesn't belong to you, is more than you need, whatever it is that you haven't worked for, and saying, all I have to do is reach out and I can grab it, even though I shouldn't, even though it's not mine, or even though I didn't deserve it or didn't work for it or whatever it is, it's just right there. I'm gonna just take it, and I'm gonna make it my own. And yeah, you're saying that what the Lord's given you isn't enough. It's saying better. It's saying that because if you got to take something that doesn't belong to you, it means it belongs to somebody else, or it
That's
should
right.
belong, or it should go to somebody else. So you're also saying that you're more important than everybody else, and your needs come first, and all those other kind of things. And like we're going to look at in this parable, I mean, it can have some pretty for Bernie Madoff, for a bunch of other people throughout history. I mean, it's had some pretty severe consequences, and if we're not careful, it's very easy for us as Christians to fall into the same trap. And before you know it, like you said, it's a process. You don't just wake up one day and go from somebody following Jesus to somebody to Bernie Madoff.
Right.
But if you're not careful, you can drift that way. And it starts with that heart of envy, of wanting that thing that you don't have, wanting this thing that somebody else has, wanting something that doesn't belong to you. And before you know it, you're David and Bathsheba, or you're Bernie Madoff.
Yep. And we kind of unintentionally touched on another point, and it's that they're never satisfied.
Right.
A person who may be walking down that road is the person who's never satisfied. How much is enough?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is, well, it's never enough, whatever it is, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's problematic, because the Lord calls us to be satisfied. Well, that means you reach a place where that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
And a person who is headed towards or given over to greediness, they're never satisfied. There's always one more thing. There's always, and you're forever chasing it. And it's the lie that if I can just get that, then I'll be happy. Well, it's not true, and then greedy people also typically have lost the desire and the ability to be empathetic. Greed, you become so self-centered that you have no empathy or sympathy for others, because with Bernie Madoff as our illustration, Bernie Madoff knew that the people that had entrusted him, if this thing ever went south, they're the losers.
Yeah.
And he had no empathy for them whatsoever. This retired couple who loses everything.
Yeah.
This guy lived high on the hog all these years, and this couple way back down on the back of the road here gave him, what they spent their entire life trying to save, and in hopes of living on, and he had no empathy for them whatsoever, no concern whatsoever.
Yeah, you can't
You
be
know?
empathetic and greedy at the same time.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So it's interesting is, when does that switch flip? And part of the challenge is we just don't know. It's kind of, I've talked to a lot of people, and one of the things um, about addiction is you don't really know when the fangs are going to sink into you. You
Right.
have to be, you have to be very careful. As a person who abused alcohol terribly as a young man, I look back and I'm really, really amazed that it didn't bite into me and hold on to me, because I worked really hard to try, and get there, and I thank the Lord that I didn't. But greed's a terrible thing, because you start thinking not only less about other people, you start thinking more about yourself, and then it starts to affect, your actions.
Hmm.
We talk about the way that you think affects the way that you feel, and the way that you feel affects the way that you act. And so if you watch this progression, Bernie being our example, he starts thinking more highly of himself than he ought. I'm better. I'm more important than, Joe and Mary down here. I deserve the money, all these things. So he begins to think something that begins to affect his heart, his empathy, his, how about, the wisdom of when and when not to take risks, those types of things. Those things go away. Well, now he steps into another symbol of a person given over to greediness, and they're a master manipulator.
Right.
They know how to move people. Now, I'm about to say something right here, and this might be controversial. This doesn't happen just only in the business world.
Sure.
We have seen it in church life. I look back, and you're a little young, but when I look at the story of Jim Jones,
Mm.
this is classic. I mean, he is a textbook case of this.
Was that the Kool-Aid guy?
That's the Kool-Aid guy. And you say, well, how powerful can a person be? Well, he talked hundreds of people to move to Central America, or actually, I guess South America, Guyana, into the jungle. They left California and moved to the jungle.
Mm.
And then most of them, not all of them, were so manipulated that they drank their own death. And greed can make you a very manipulative individual. And
So you got
unfortunately, when you get there, you don't really think about or care so much about who you may hurt.
so you got these people that they don't have any empathy, but yet they're very good at pretending they have empathy to other people. So
Oh yeah,
that's where this manipulation comes in, is that they're narcissistic, they're never satisfied, they don't have any empathy, and yet on the outside, I'm sure Bernie Madoff was just the most charismatic, seemingly empathetic dude.
yeah. They say that he had personality to spare,
Right.
and that part part of the challenge is, most of the time, if you go and look at the people like Bernie Madoff or Jim Jones, their personalities are like mine. They're very gregoric, and people like to be around them, and they just have this, and they find that they have this, and they abuse it.
Right.
And it's a sad thing. To betray someone's trust is a terrible thing, and to do it at your own benefit and their loss it's a terrible thing. And we have to be very careful, because we can do it on a smaller scale. It may not be multi-millions of dollars, but we can manipulate people for
Mm.
things very easily, and we can try to justify it very easily too. The sixth mark of a greedy person or someone that are in peril of being that is greedy people are always in it for the short run, not the long run. They don't take down the road into consideration. It's just what's in it for me right here, right now. Kind of darn the consequences. Bernie Madoff, I'm sure thought to one degree or another, well, this is just going to roll on forever.
Which, if you think about it, is really immature, childish behavior. It's like, kids, they don't have the
Mm-hmm.
whatever the frontal lobe or whatever isn't developing
Right.
their brains, and so they take chances because they don't really think through the long term effects. When you have somebody who's acting like this, I mean, that's an immaturity. That's almost an underdeveloped sense. They're being childish and adolescent and immature to have that kind of mindset.
Yeah. And we if we're not careful, we can do that. We really need to think through the process, think through the consequences. We've talked about it here at ALF many a time. It's those scales. We have to get the scales out and ask ourselves, is this worth whatever we're willing to sacrifice? And the last mark of a greedy person is they really know no limits, and they know no limits in what they're willing to do and to whom they're willing to do it and to what extent they're willing to do it. And that's a tragic thing, because then there's no brakes, there's no guardrails. You're just a storm. You're a tornado. And I want to kind of take it back into the church. You look at over the years, and I'm not going to call names. I'm not trying to, but I've seen individuals, and they'll claim that this piece of cloth has some sort of special power, and they'll send it to you for
Right.
you know for a
Nominal fee.
monetary donation. And I look at these, and I'm thinking, that isn't that the epitome, that you would have no limits, that you would even prey on the desperation of someone. Oh, if I'll just send him my last $20, I'll get this cloth, and I could put it on, my cancer, or I could put it on my blind eye, or how terrible is that? And
That's the lowest of the lows.
I gotta tell you, I'm not God, and it's a good thing for all of us, but I just got to believe there is something uniquely awaiting the people who have perverted the Lord's church and the Lord's word for such a thing. I don't know what it is, and I just want to believe by faith that there's a greater payday someday, because it's just so terrible.
That old saying, "There's a special place in hell for
Well,
those people."
I don't want anyone to go there, but it's such a terrible thing. Greed can just eat you alive, and it can eat your soul, and it can just consume you. And there's not a single one of us that cannot find ourselves at least walking parallel to the road, if not walking on the road.
Mm-hmm.
But to be very careful. And we've got here, about 5 minutes. So I want to give us a little bit of a crescendo here, so we can kind of talk about it. We look at Bernie Madoff. Now, whether man was a believer, I don't have a clue. That's, but you look at Bernie Madoff, and he eventually walked into the 7 stripes of being greedy, and he had fame, he had fortune, he had stuff. I mean, all those things. He sold his soul for $65 billion. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a lot of money. I mean, that's a, if you're going to sell your soul, that's a pretty good squeeze on, that's a pretty good squeeze. But the challenge that we face, and I want to remind myself first, is this: is if I'm not careful, I can sell my soul for a whole lot less.
Sure.
You know, his whole quote unquote empire came down. But think of the kingdom you and I enjoy. You know, your life, my life, our ministry. We could give it all away for not even pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. No, I agree.
When I came here 16 years ago, one of the things that I asked for and fortunate and I'm glad we had was money and sexual impropriety will ruin a minister and a ministry quicker than anything. Those two things right there. Now, there's other things,
sure,
but those two things right there will shoot you out of the saddle quicker than anything. And so, given the fact, Jim Jones, he was what he was. Then you had Jim Baker. Well, he was just a swindler, and then I hate to say the other Jimmy, so I won't. But I wanted to build a firewall to ensure. First of all, I'm a human being. And there are times when my month is longer than my paycheck. And temptation is what it is, right? It comes to all of us. And I wanted to build in a safety net to ensure that I never, ever, ever could fall victim to that temptation here at ALF.
Right.
And so we built in certain parameters that ensure, first, I can't access it. I can't write checks. I can't do any of that by design. But secondly, it also saves me from accusation of it.
Right.
And the world that we live in today, Josh, I think you'd agree, you don't have to be guilty. In some instances, you just have to be accused.
Oh, yeah.
And that's enough.
Yeah.
And so, we built that in, and Josh, we built that in for you. We've got that safeguard for you. And I think it's wise. You and I both have friends in the ministry, and we've seen them. They've got the church checkbook, and they're writing checks and stuff. And I just got cold chills thinking about it. But
what do you think we should at least read our Luke passage?
Yeah. How about we do that?
At the end of things, I think we set it up really well. I mean, it kind of speaks for itself. It's not very long. I think it's a parable everybody knows. Would be, I think, a good way to kind of round this one out. We talked all about Madoff, and we talked about these people and greed and all this stuff, and we come to this rich fool or this rich landowner in Luke 12:13 and 21, and I'll just read it real fast for us. It says in verse 13, "Then someone from the crowd said to him being Jesus, 'Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me.' But Jesus said to them, 'Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator between you two?' Then he said to them, 'Watch out and guard yourself from all types of greed, because one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions.' He then told them a parable. The land of a certain rich man produced an abundant crop. So he thought to himself, 'What should I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' Then he said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to myself, you have plenty of goods stored up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and celebrate.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life will be demanded back from you. But who will get what you have prepared for yourself? So it is with the one who stores up riches for himself, but is not rich toward God.'" And the things that kind of stick out to me are a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And then, so it is at the end, so it is with the one who stores up riches for himself, but is not rich toward God. You're either, the opposite of being greedy is this kind of being rich toward God, or realizing that you're just the steward of the things that God has given you, and to kind of flow those things away from you to the people and the places that need them, instead of doing it as something to kind of take and hoard and build up.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, going, where can where can this go? How can this be used? It completely flips it on its
Yeah.
head. And I think Madoff was a lot more like this rich landowner
Oh yeah.
than he probably thought.
So I think there's three questions. If we will be disciplined enough to ask ourselves, it can be a daily vitamin against greediness.
I
And
like
the
it.
first one is this: what is yours? Jimmy, what is yours? Well, the truth is, like you said, nothing is mine. I'm
Right.
the steward of this wonderful office, and I'm a steward of this laptop. I'm a steward of things, but what do I own? What? Nothing.
You can't take any of it with you, so you don't own
No,
any of it.
no. Secondly, is where did it come from? Well, as a man who wants to believe the Bible says what? All good and perfect gifts come from the Father above. How much do I have? Well, more than I deserve. And if I don't own it, and if it's a entrustment to me, where did it come from? It's not from me. It's from the Lord, and my salary and your salary comes through the faithfulness of God's people. They're out there at L3 and all other places today, and they're working, and they give to the Lord, and part of what they give to the Lord is given to us, and we have that provision. And then lastly is this: what will last?
Mm.
One day, the only thing that lasts is the treasures we lay up in heaven.
Right.
And so, can we enjoy the things of this earth? Well, sure. Can we have nice things? Yeah. But the question is, are we properly focused, and are we holding on? And I liked what you said, loose enough that it can pass through our fingers, but firm enough that we can steward it and guide it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I tell you, life gets really simple when you can find contentment.
Oh yeah.
And it sets you free from so many things. And
I bet Bernie never got it. I mean, I bet Bernie
no,
died in that. I doubt that he died in that jail cell with his boys dead
mm,
and all. I don't think he was content at the end of it.
no, I mean, he lost everything. Literally,
Yeah.
he lost everything and died alone in prison.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm with you. I don't think he lays down in that club-fed bed and goes, "Man, I'm killing it."
Mm-hmm. He probably would. He probably thinks if I had just been satisfied with the millions I had,
Yes,
he
that's
could have
right.
had grandkids, and there would have been 37,000 plus people whose lives would have been positively
Yeah,
impacted, or at least not negatively impacted by him. So
yeah.
I mean that leads us to think like, what one man's greed can hurt the lives of tens of thousands of people. On the flip side, what can one man's contentment bring? What can
He could
one
have
man's
been their hero.
satisfaction in the Lord? Exactly.
He had gifts, obviously. He had experience, obviously. He had connections, obviously. He could have been a blessing to them. And up until that switch flipped, he was.
Right.
So a man who was a blessing became a curse. And today, when you hear the word Bernie Madoff, there's only one thing.
He's a villain. He's a bad
And
guy.
woe is the man. You and I talk about it a lot. Legacy is important to
Mm-hmm.
me. It may not be important to everybody. It's important to me. If the
Hey,
Lord
yeah.
carries and I go to the Lord before he comes for us, I want the world to say, it was better because he was here.
Yeah. And
But
you
Bernie
better be
Madoff.
really careful because you're a pastor. His name is Jimmy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to
Oh,
buck
yeah.
that trend.
Hey,
You got to buck the Baker Jones
that's right.
swagger trend.
One decision and it all goes away. And so, I guess, we really, to kind of put it all is, let's seek the Lord and ask him to build a heart of contentment.
Amen.
And one of the things I've come to realize is this: one of the reasons I may not have more than I do have, Maybe because I'm not ready or I'm not a good manager of what I already have.
Sure.
You know, a loving father doesn't give you more when you're doing a poor job with what you have. So the simple prayer is this: Lord, teach me to appreciate what I have. Teach me to properly steward what I have. And, I will graciously receive what you will give to me in light of what can I do with it for the kingdom.
Amen.
And you will be astonished after what God will put into your hands if it's for the kingdom,
Yeah.
So that's our word to you, ripped straight from the headlines.
Yeah. If you want another guy to compare, go do your research. Go look for a guy named George Mueller. Compare the life of George Mueller with the life of Bernie Madoff, and
That's right.
that's your homework. Go
Two
do that
different
whenever
guys.
this is.
George Mueller changed the world.
Yeah.
And never owned a thing.
Nope.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a good one, Josh. Yeah. Google him. Go find out about him. So, well, all right. Well, Josh, thank you for taking some time. And it's going to be really kind of interesting of when this actually gets played. We'll see. But
if it's a Sunday morning, then y'all better get to church.
That's right. That's right. So, Josh, I pray for you. You're a young man, and the whole world lies ahead of you, and I just pray that the Lord would always guard your heart and keep you humble, and because you're a wonderful instrument in the hand of a loving, holy God, and I want you to be double mantle whatever God would choose to do with me, and together we're going to guard each other, and we just want to call all of you guys, guard your heart. And don't give in to the lies of the world. You are valuable, you are precious, you are important, not based on what you own, but because of what the cross and the empty tomb says. So
Amen.
Always lean upon that. Well, all right, sir. I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts? Cries of outrage, fits of anger?
I love it. I mean, whenever we play this, whatever we're doing, just know that we love you guys. And, Jimmy always says, make sure you're part of the answer, not part of the problem.
That's right. That's right. So, well, all right. Well, Josh, let's get back to work.
We'll see.